Tomorrow night, it will get buck wild up in here.
Burt, what's happening, baby?
What's up, baby? How you doing, man?
I'm bored out of my mind, man. There's nothing to do where I live, and there's nobody to do nothing with. I'm happy to be joined by you, though. I can tell you that much.
Well, don't feel bad because everybody else is doing just about the same thing. They probably so damn tired of looking at themselves, they don't know who's who. So don't feel bad. Listen, man, welcome to Legends to Legends. I appreciate you coming and joining me. You know, we've known each other for quite a little while, and we've had different various conversations, but all of our conversations have been mainly event related. Now I want to sit and chat. You know, I'm going to ask you questions, and I'm going to want you to ask me a few questions, whatever. No questions off bounds as far as I'm concerned. You can ask me whatever, baby, and I'm ready to roll. But let me tell you something. I've done a little research, and I've clicked in my memory bank a little bit, and I'm going to tell you, when we're done with this, I'm going to personally call Netflix, and if they don't pick up your story, then there's something wrong, you know? Trust me. I've done my research, and man, you got a story behind you.
And by the way, I would love something new to watch on Netflix. I have exhausted that channel. I signed up for something called Hulu. I've watched everything on there. I got Amazon Prime. Listen, man, I got channels I didn't even know were channels when this whole thing started. I've seen it all, Burt.
Well, let me give you a little hint. Gunsmoke, Rawhide, Half Gun Will Travel, The Lone Ranger. Hey, man, there's a plethora of those things. In fact, on those things, the blood is still gray. Okay, you don't get jaded. You don't feel intimidated by anything you see. Believe me, that's the only type of television that I watch. When they do decide to do this, I'm going to tell you, I want to play myself or your coach. Now, I forgot your coach's name, but he was always going around saying that he was my son.
Clayton Hires. Or as I've heard him describe himself, Clayton Hires, dark-skinned brother, kind of guy a girl dreams about. I have heard him introduce himself as that.
Now, you know what? That sounds like my son. Exactly. Exactly. You know what? There's been a time when somebody's come up behind me and tapped me on the shoulder when you were doing a fight and thought that I was Clayton, you know, with the little hat and the little thing going on. But listen, man, you've had one heck of a career. You've had 49 pro fights around the world, in Japan and the U.S. You made your pro debut in 1997. You know, with this being 2019, with Bellator being your last fight, and we'll get into whether you're retired or you're still rolling or not, but you've kind of put in 22 years of this, and that's unbelievable. You wrestled at Brigham Young University and the University of Oregon. You're a silver medal in Greco-Roman at the World University Championship. You once even tried a little bit of professional wrestling in 1998. If I'm right, yep. I think I've done my homework a little bit. You know, your UFC pro debut was in 2005. You fought in UFC, WEC, Bellator, Pancrase, Bulldog fights, and you host ESPN MMA and your own Bad Guy Inc. That's a ton of stuff and a very busy man.
Well, Burt, I appreciate that. Hey, you made me smile on that. You brought back some good memories when you're talking like the WEC and Bodog. I mean, we had some really great times. And by the way, of those 49 men I fought, Burt, over 22 years, I never finished less than second. Can you believe that? All those years, and I was never less than second. Quite remarkable.
I'll tell you one thing. You always came in first and putting yourself out there, you know? Why don't you just kind of throw all that together before we get cranking and just kind of give us a little bit of history of where you got started, you know, where you're from. You know, you're a guy from Westland, Oregon, from Brigham Young University through Oregon State, but you spread nothing but hot sauce all the way across from Oregon to Las Vegas. Louisiana hot sauce. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your history and how you got started?
Okay, so my story wasn't overly complex. I came from a family of wrestlers. My father, my uncles, all my cousins who I really looked up to were all wrestlers. And there was a rule in my house. Now, we had lots of rules, but one of the premier rules was you do not skip school, period. If we think you're in school, you need to be where we think you are. You don't want to go to class today? Let us know type deal. But that was the rule. And I followed that very closely until 1994. Junior year in high school, I cut class my one and only time. I went to the video store with my buddy Jeff. We went to Jeff's house because his parents were gone, and we watched a VHS copy of something called The Ultimate Fighting Championship. And I went home after school and I confessed to my father what I did. I said, but Dad, here's the good news. I found out what I want to do with my life. And so I told him all about this. I didn't get in any kind of trouble, believe it or not. He let it go, I think maybe because I confessed to him, but he was also very intrigued by what I was telling him that I watched and telling him how these guys were doing in these different art forms. And my career kind of went from there. My dad was all in. We went right to a boxing gym and signed up for boxing. I've been wrestling my whole life, but we signed up for boxing. I want to say it was that night, if not within a couple of days of me coming home with this story, and just kind of started the pursuit. I went off to college at Brigham Young, and the coach there was a man named Mark Schultz. And Mark Schultz had won the Worlds and the Olympic Games. He was a great and decorated wrestler, but he also had a black belt in jiu-jitsu. And I didn't even know what jiu-jitsu was. We heard this term, you got this guy named Hoist Gracie on this VHS, but there was no gym or club with jiu-jitsu. And that was one of the reasons I went to BYU, was specifically because we had a coach who knew this form of martial art that nobody else had ever heard of. And because I dreamed of being a fighter. You know, I was just a young kid, but I had this dream like any other young kid. And when I got out of college, I just pursued it.
Now, I understand that you started at Brigham Young and you were there, and there was talk of disbanding their wrestling program, and you transferred from there to the University of Oregon, was it?
Yeah, that's all that happened. So to go back to the coach, Mark Schultz, and you got to understand, Brigham Young is a very religious college, emphasis on Mormonism.
Is that Mormon?
Yeah, it was a Mormon college, Latter-day Saints, same thing as Mormon. And the coach, Mark Schultz, got an opportunity to go fight in the UFC, and he took it. And I want to say he was paid like $46,000 a year to be the head wrestling coach. He got $50,000 for one night over in this thing called the UFC. So when he took that, the athletic director found out about it and said, hey, you ever do that again and you're fired. And they never really patched things up from there. The writing was on the wall that the program was going to be disbanded. So I transferred and went to the University of Oregon, and sure enough, they did cut that program. But funny how that also tied in to a martial arts thing through the coach. But yeah, I ended up at the University of Oregon, about 2 hours from the house I grew up in. My parents could come up and watch me wrestle and compete, and great time, man. It was a great time of life. I was there for 4 years, but boy, it went by in the blink of an eye.
And you got out of there, and as I said, you spread Louisiana hot sauce from Oregon all the way to Vegas, you know? Now your nickname, the bad guy, the gangster, brash, cocky, all of the good things. But you seem to embrace that. You know, it's like everyone enjoyed putting a camera in your face. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Burt, I got to tell you, so they started calling me the gangster because of a number of federal crimes that I committed. And really, it was half a Robin Hood. I mean, if I was to explain this to you in simple terms, it was half a Robin Hood. Robin Hood stole from the rich and gave to the poor. I stole from the rich and then I kept it. And I'm not saying I'm a hero, Burt. I'm just saying I'm a regular guy who did something heroic. So perhaps they should call me that instead. Perhaps they should call me a hero.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. In all of my career, you know, since 2001, you are the original. You are the original Chael Talk. You know, I've heard that, you know, I've heard others come along, you know, and try to perpetrate. And at times I hear them comparing Conor McGregor to you and your style, but you're the original. You know, sometimes a guy can talk through and talk things and not be as venomous. You were never venomous with your stuff. Your stuff was always smooth and it always made sense, you know. How did you manage to put that together like that? Where did that come from?
You know, I consider that a big compliment. I think that's how you meant it. And I did have fun with that. And I've heard that same comparison to Conor McGregor. And I've loved Conor's work.
Wait a second. I didn't compare you to Conor McGregor. I reversed that, bro.
You
you were the original.
You most certainly did, Bert, and I appreciate what I'm saying is I have heard other people try to draw a comparison between Conor and I will just tell you, I love what Conor does. I think it is so fun. I will stop what I'm doing if Conor's got a microphone in his hand. So I like that, but as far as, I was influenced by other people too. And I appreciate you calling me the original. I think in this space I definitely was, but there was other guys that came. I mean, of course we got the great Muhammad Ali, but you could look to the world of professional wrestling. I'm not as big of a professional wrestling fan as sometimes I hear said about myself, but there was greats over there. Stone Cold, The Rock come to mind. And there was just something about that. I had a different impression of what people wanted to see. I used to talk about that with my dad. As we'd sit around and try to figure out the best style to go into the sport, the best style to train. And we also would sit around and try to figure out, who do people want to see? What is the best marketing arm? What is the best way to get attention and get people to pay attention and stop what they're doing to watch what you're doing? So, it's just one of these things where, I would work on a lot of that stuff. You called me smooth. I appreciated that. I used to work on that, though. I go to press conferences and have an idea of what was going to be asked, and I would start to form ideas of what message I wanted to give back. And over time, I even had some people that criticized that. They go, well, wait a minute, he had that planned. And I'm going, why would I ever show up anywhere and not be prepared? I never went to a test a day in my life where I didn't study for it. I never went to fight without training for it. Why would I treat a press conference any different?
Let me tell you something. I've worked with Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, and I came up within that era, and I saw how he handled it. And I transitioned from boxing right into MMA. And you have a degree in sociology, which I don't know how many people knew that, but everything you did, there was a strategy to it. I mean, there were so many stories that I heard and I listened to. I heard one little, I call them skits. I heard you talk one about your hardships growing up in Westland, and your dad barely made $100,000 a year. And your maid only worked twice a week. You remember that?
Yeah. No, that was tough, Bert. I mean, it did it in there. I could go on. There was days it was so hot, the air conditioner didn't work. We had to go outside and jump in the swimming pool just to cool off, man. It was disgusting, but that's all behind me now, fortunately.
You said at one point your neighbors had twins and they only had one Mercedes.
They had to share that car. They had to share the car, Bert. Who's shotgun today? Who gets to drive, man? These are things I had to see. I saw a guy one time litter in a park. Just publicly, just litter. And so, sure, somebody picked it up and put it in the trash can, but for the moments that had to sit there and the law was broken right in front of me, you wonder why I grew up to be this way. The streets made me, Watson.
I'll tell you one thing. You sure picked it up and walked the walk and you talked the talk. You started your professional career in 1997, and you entered into the UFC in 2005. And things started happening, and you started kind of working your way through. And then you came upon this situation with Vanderlei Silva, who felt you disrespected him, the people of Brazil, Brazilians, and, during your time on the Tough Show, he actually threatened to walk off the show. What happened with that, and what was that situation?
Oh, Bert, that was a mess. So my heat was with Anderson Silva, and Anderson would be right to be disgusted with me. I invoked his wife. I invoked his entire country, his people. I mean, I was spreading that hot sauce, as you put it, all around. But somehow Vanderlei tried to insert himself in the conversation. I was never really clear. I'm not clear to this day how Vanderlei became a part of Anderson and I's beef. But okay, here we are. And we get out to the Ultimate Fighter. And Bert, I mean, this story's already written. We don't need a script. I get it. He gets it. He gets to wear the white hat. I got to wear the black hat. I'm the guy that insulted this whole country, and now I'm in the country. It's not going to be great for me, but he gets to be the big hero. So on the very first day, for reasons unknown, he stands up before we start filming, and he demands, we're all in the same room. Like, the way this works is the fighters that fight to get their way in, and so everybody else leaves that got beat. Everybody's there is all that. And then Vanderlei's coaches are going to pick them like a kickball team.
Now, this was Tough Brazil, correct?
Tough Brazil, yeah. So I'm in the country. Nobody wants me there. I mean, even these guys that are about to be on my team are all hoping I don't pick them. It's not a wonderful day. It's a very tense moment. And with me, I got Vinny, who, I got Scott McCoy, I got Jamie, and then I have Clayton. That's it. Nobody else even speaks the language. So, I mean, if this thing goes to fisticuffs, we're not coming in first. I can tell you that much. So, I'm out there to do my part. And, later I'm going to kind of let the guys in on the gag that, hey, between Anderson and I, we were doing business over there. But, give me another chance. But I don't even get that far. Vanderlei stands up and says, before we go any further, and he points to me, and I'm completely outnumbered, you are going to apologize. Unless you apologize, I'm leaving. Well, then you're going to have to leave, man, because that's not part of the skit. I do not give apologies. It's part of being the bad guy. Like, I can't really come off brand to make you feel better in a room of empty people when I'm trying to entertain the masses at a later date on television. That just isn't going to happen. So he left. I mean, that was the sucker's move that he made, is he didn't give himself any other way out. It's like, Vanderlei, why did you include, or I'm going to leave? Like, why would you make it so extreme? So he grabs his jacket and he leaves, and we all have to go in a back room. And it's getting late, Burt. I mean, it's 1 a.m, 1:30, 2 a.m. These guys are all beat up. They'd already fought that day, even though they won, but they're all beat up. They're tired. They're hungry. This thing turns into a mess. So all of a sudden, he who was supposed to be the hero is now the villain. I was supposed to be the villain. I'm now the hero. Like, everything was wrong. And so Vanderlei and I go in a back room, and I even explained this to him. They took the cameras down. We took our microphones off. I said, Vanderlei, you have to understand this. You get to be the hero. But if you bully me and pick on me, that's going to make me sympathetic. I don't want to be liked. You do. So go ahead and take it. I'll take the other role. That's the one I want. But I couldn't get him. He did not understand. He was too hard-headed. And when the whole thing was done, he came out the bad guy, Ed came out the good guy. He hated it. I hated it. I didn't want to be the good guy, Burt.
It definitely came across like that, because in watching that and listening, when he asked you for an apology, I didn't see where the apology was coming from, or what were you apologizing for, or did I miss something? What? But he's threatened that if you didn't apologize, and I knew you went at Anderson because somebody's wife you were going to have cook a steak and do a little patting.
Medium rare, Burt, the way I like it. She brings it to me overcooked. I send it back.
Well, that's probably what he heard, because I know that he wanted an apology. Now, maybe the apology was for him and the people of Brazil and the Brazilian people, and but he just felt you just disrespected everybody. So he was picking up Anderson Silva slack. But then he threatened to leave and he left.
He walked out, and that was bigger than you would think it was. I mean, he literally left, and now, I mean, he put himself in a really hard spot. There was a part where we thought, well, I don't think he's going to want to miss this show and then have to deal with Dana after this. But the other side of it is, he said he was going to leave, and he walked out. I mean, they were starting to make phone calls to Vitor Belfort to see if they could get him on a. I mean, the production, the way those studios work, you've seen The Ultimate Fighter. You don't have time for this kind of stuff. We've got to go. Every 3 days is a new show. We package these things up, and everybody flies home. So yeah, it was a very real thing. And that was tough. I said that to Vanderlei too. I said, hey, this was between Anderson and I. Oh, and by the way, I answered for it. I got my ass kicked in front of the world for some of those things. That is the punishment. There's not an additional punishment. By the way, did you hear a moment ago when I compared myself to Robin Hood? I felt like you didn't really give me full credit for that analogy. Half a Robin Hood, Burt. Hello, is this thing on? Hello. Half a Robin Hood.
I heard that, but I figured, I said, you know what? I'm not going to let him get me. I'm going to kind of let that one go. But I was going to bring it back, because I heard how you compared yourself. Instead of robbing from the rich and giving it to the poor, you kept it for yourself. Right. Oh, I heard that.
Yeah. Which is half heroic. That's all I'm saying. I mean, I didn't get all the way there. I didn't get all the way there, but I got halfway. And, sometimes just entering the race is the real victory.
Now, it was said, and I saw, I didn't see exactly who actually threw the first shove or whatever, but you and he got into a tussling match and actually got into a fight, correct?
Yes. So on the very first day, part of the apology that I had to give, he also pushed me that day. And that put a bad taste in my mouth, because, I mean, and you do have to understand my situation, which is I know nobody wants me here. I'm well aware of all the things I said and did. but I'm here anyway, right? We're trying to make some TV and get some race, so I'm here anyway. And it was just one of these tough spots, and I hadn't met anybody yet. I have friendships and relationships to this day with these guys, but they hadn't started yet. We hadn't even picked teams. So when he pushes me in kind of like this gang mentality, it was a little bit more intimidating. I mean, Vanderlei Silva's an intimidating guy to start with. They call him the axe murderer for a reason. But then when you're looking around and go, man, it's 32 on 3. Right? I mean, it's 32 on 3, and Clayton, not for nothing, but is retired. I mean, what are we doing here? So,
well, that's all right. He should still be able to put a hand in and give a little hand and fight.
Oh, he would have. Believe me, he would have. But it was one of these things where it's like, Vanderlei, let's not do this. So he pushes me, but that's all he did. So I take the push, I allow the separate, I just let it go. But in fairness, I let it go in large part, Burt, because I was scared. I mean, there was a part of it, it's like, Vanderlei, what are we doing? Like, fighting you after a training camp on an agreed upon time is a tall order. Fighting you in the streets with no gloves? No, thank you. So, but that was the very first day, and that was never caught on camera. So as we fast forward through this process, I was pretty weary of this guy. I didn't know him personally. Anderson Silva, I think, kind of understood a little bit about what was happening, whether he let the world know or not. I think he understood, okay, just let this guy go sell the ticket. Vanderlei appeared to not get it and to have taken it legitimately personal. So that, well, maybe the best way to do here is just stay away from this guy. And then one day we end up together, and he confronted me, and I tried to blow him off, and he came back again and a third time, and finally he pushed me. But I was real worried at that point. Like, if he got into, my dad used to tell me, a lot of people's fathers would tell them, you can defend yourself if the other guy throws the first punch. My dad's was a little different, which is if the guy gets within arm's reach, the fight has begun. You don't have to take the first punch. Keep your space, but if he invades your space, the fight just began. So I followed that same rule with Vanderlei. I told myself, look, if that guy ever gets within arm's reach, go first, or you might not get a go at all. And so I told him that. I said, Vanderlei, I kept putting my hands, I said, Vanderlei, I cannot let you get close. And that was my real short way of telling him. My father told me don't let anybody get close. So he came in close, and boom, the fight was on.
And during that melee, I think it was Badea, one of his trainers sucker punched you. Did you know that?
Yeah, so his name is Dida.
Dida, yes.
Dida, I was on top of Vanderlei, and I mean, there's a swarm of guys coming in there. I got a jersey, one of those really thick, tough jerseys, and that thing got ripped all the way off my back, and then somebody's punching me in the back of the head. And I remember holding Vanderlei down. It's a melee. There's people everywhere. But I remember thinking as I was getting hit in the head, like, how is he doing that? I can see his arms. It had never crossed my mind, Burt, that somebody else would be punching me while Vanderlei and I are in the middle of a fight. Not to mention making a TV show. I mean, that's a pretty good clip for a TV show. So after the fact,
everything's on camera.
Yeah, everything's on camera, including this thing we're talking about now with the punches from Dida. And people were telling me after the fact, they go, no, it was Dida. Dida was punching you. And even though they were telling me, I was having a hard time processing and accepting that. I'm going, wait a minute, Dida wasn't an athlete. He was a coach, which is a whole nother level, right? I mean, a coach is a different level. So for him to be involved with sucker punch, I couldn't accept it. They had to show me it on tape. The next day, Dana fires Dida. And fast forward 3 years, I'm in New York City getting ready to fight Vanderlei. My mother runs into Dida in the lobby of the hotel and gives him the business. And Dida was a total gentleman, I must say. He apologized to my mother. He said, I've already had to apologize to my own mom. I apologize to you. I'm so sorry. I have never talked to Dida about it. He never apologized to me. But as far as I'm concerned, we're good.
Was that the first show that your mother came to?
No, my mom came to my mom's never missed a match. I've even fought in Japan before. I've wrestled overseas before. She's been at all of them. She comes to every practice on top of that. So no, my mom was there, but it was the first time she ran into Dida. And my wife was there and oversaw it too and said that it was pretty bad. Like, even as Dida apologized, my mother continued to lay into him. And this was 3 years after it happened. I was a little embarrassed.
Wow. And no one reacted. Well, you know what? I mean, if she's been to most of your fights, believe me, I can understand. Mom, I think I met your mom once.
Yeah, you've definitely met her. Burt, I got to give you a quick story. So, when I got to Brazil, back up to the Vanderlei Silva situation, but when I got to Brazil, this was bad. And a lot of the viewers, you'll understand this and so will I, but maybe the viewers won't. But MMA is so big in Brazil. It is the number 2 sport in the whole country. I mean, we've got football and baseball and basketball and maybe even hockey all in front of MMA here. But in Brazil, it goes soccer, MMA, and it's not all that big of everybody knows what MMA is. So before I come out there, I'm getting death threats, and they're very, like, real threats. Like, one guy was even telling me how he was going to kill me and where he was going to hide my body. Like, he had a lake picked out, and they were pretty descriptive death threats. So Dana hires a full-time 24/7 armed security detail that I'm with. I mean, I didn't go anywhere without a bulletproof car, by example. And that would seem very extreme today, but at the time was very appropriate. So the relevance to that is these guys' job is to protect me. And they were there when Vanderlei and Dida jumped me. And so the guy who's armed and is there had to pull Vanderlei aside and go, hey, look, I will never try to fight with you. But my job is to protect him, and here's how I do it. And he pulls his jacket, but he's got a gun on his hip, and he said, you're putting me in a very weird spot. Just do your TV show. I do not want to have to shoot you, but this is my job. Don't do it again. And I had to go talk to that guy and go, well, and under no circumstance do you shoot. If I got to take a beating, I take a beating, but don't shoot this guy. But I'm telling you that, Burt, very sober, but that's how serious this was. And I don't know that Vanderlei ever really caught on. Like, hey, Vanderlei, this guy over here, man, he's not just here as a wall piece, and he's not here to fight, just so you understand.
Wow. And you had, but that's not the first time that I've seen that situation where security, when we went to Brazil, everybody had to get used to that culture because, like you said, those Brazilian MMA fighters and mixed martial arts over there was next to soccer. It was unbelievable how those fans, how they loved. But there was a situation with Anthony. I forgot
Johnson?
Anthony's name.
Rumble? Rumble Johnson?
No. I'm drawing a blank, but this young man was there and they actually swiped his necklace. Anthony Johnson from Chicago, and they actually swiped his necklace off of his neck. And one of the guys or somebody, somehow it got around that he snatched a guy who was with Anderson Silva. They brought the necklace back to the hotel and gave it to the front desk and put his name on it. But it was his necklace. Well, he was offended because you had a conversation or you talked bad about Anderson Silva. He didn't like that at all. At UFC 117, you fought Anderson Silva in 2010. You got the fight of the night, you got the fight of the year. You actually led on all cards when you fought Anderson Silva. Now, and at the end, you got caught in an armbar. But then you dispute that and said it was a choke before. Did you run out of gas or what happened in that fight?
Okay, so that was my first time in the 5th round. I had been scheduled for 2 other fights that were 5-round contests in the WEC. We never saw all 5 rounds, though. So my first time in the 5th round, the reason I bring that up is because when you talk about run out of gas, I can tell you I was for sure very tired. Now, I don't ever remember having a fight in my life where I left with any energy. I mean, I used it all, and I'm used to being tired, but this maybe was another level. I do remember one thing, which was in the 5th round, which I had never been to before. My corner had told me before the round that it was the 4th round, that we had 2 rounds to go. And I only bring that up to you because I have often wondered, would have I done something different if I knew there was only a minute left? A minute left and I'm going to be the world champion as opposed to a whole nother round. And I don't know. And that is an attempt to blame a corner. I'm just sharing a story with you about that specific moment.
So you had no idea where you were in time and where the clock was and at that point?
No, we were doing in 5 round. 5 isn't all that big of a number, but when you've never been in the 5-round club before, I mean, it's a very unique experience. You can look at fighters that have been doing this 20 and 25 years. Vitor Belfort comes to mind. Absolute legend, world champion, will be in the Hall of Fame. He is not in the 5-round club. He has never gone 5 rounds, and I don't suspect he ever will. I only bring Vitor as a name that people will recognize, and to point out for you, it's a very rare club. Not many guys are ever a main event or a title fight to even be put in 5 rounds, let alone to go the duration. So to share with you, I did lose track of the rounds. I didn't really know where I was, and he hadn't hit me very many times. But every time he hit me, it affected me. So, between all of the chaos that goes on, lost track of the rounds, and it was a choke. It wasn't an arm bar that made me tap, and I didn't really know where I was. Like in that moment, as you start to fall asleep, it's one of these things where as you start to go out, even if it's for a half a second, it could be 5 minutes. You don't know how much time. It's kind of like when you go to sleep at night. Have I been asleep 5 hours? Have I been asleep 5 minutes? You don't really know. You got to look at a clock. So it was kind of one of those strange moments, and I'd never seen the fight. I never watch any of my fights over. It's a weakness. I'd be better off if I did, but I never do. It makes my stomach nervous. My hands get sweaty, even if I know the outcome. Wow. And I've never rewatched that fight, and I don't think I ever will.
So leading up to that fight, you had fought Dan Miller, Yushin Okami, and Nate Marquardt. In fact, beating Nate Marquardt was what set you up for that fight. And you fought at light heavyweight and at middleweight. How much of a break does a fighter need in between fights or after a big fight like that, like the one you had with Anderson?
Well, I'll tell you, I think each athlete can give his own opinion for himself, but I've only got one resentment towards this sport or towards this industry, which is that we only get 3 matches a year. When I was growing up from 9 years old until I graduated college at 23 years old, we got 5 and 6 matches a week. Every Saturday was a tournament. You'd have 4 to 5 to 6 matches just on that Saturday. I mean, I could put 25 to 30 matches together in a month. And, it was a 10-month season. You got 2 months off and you came in and did it again. I've always resented the fact that there's something make-believe that we need X amount of time between fights. And maybe that's good for some guys and not for others, but for the others that it's not, I wish we could be a little bit more busy. So how much time's a guy need, man? I don't know. These fighters are the laziest guys I've ever met, Burt. It's the sport I look up to. It's the guys that I admire, but the more you get to know them, the more I'm turned off. I don't know who raised some of these guys. They sleep in at all hours of the day. They play video games. I mean, some of these guys are playing video games as grown men. They're like posting it on their social media that they're playing Super Mario, man. It's freaking weird. And then you go to work 3 times a year? Come on. And then some of them don't even show up. Some of them call in sick one of those 3 times. My father was a plumber. He would have never missed work no matter what. And these guys don't want to show up 1 of 3 times a year? Come on, you're a bunch of fake tough guys. I would never call in sick. Never, ever. If I don't feel good, then he could get the win. But I'm not going to concede it to him by not making the walk. You say you're going to do something, you do it at the time you said you were going to do it, the end.
Is it easier for you if you create beef with a fighter or if there's animosity?
It was a lot easier for motivation, for not only the media, but it was also motivation to get up and train. The training was the hard part. The fight is most definitely tough, but it was the training that was so difficult. Oh, my goodness. Like, when I finally retired from the sport, Burt, I do miss the competition. I miss walking in that arena. I miss being in the back and feeling those nerves, getting your hands around. I miss all that stuff, and I think
and Burt Watson getting you pumped up, baby.
We rolling, baby, of course, man. You just sit there waiting to hear that sound. But I will tell you this, there's not one day of my life I have missed those practices. I mean, those workouts were so hard and so grueling. We used to run every single morning. Every Sunday morning, 6 a.m. is when we reported to what he called the track. And we had to run that track to warm up, and then 2 rounds on the mitts just to warm up. And then we got to run up this hill. It was 2.5 miles straight uphill, so just an incline. Once you get to the top, 3 rounds of mitt work. Halfway down, run the staircase 3 times, all the way down, 1 sprint around the track, go home. It took exactly 1 hour. It was so hard, and it was 6 a.m. every Sunday. And out here in Oregon, we deal with snow. We deal with shine. We deal with rain most of it. It did not matter. 6 o'clock on the track Sunday or else. And I never found out what the or else was. I never missed. But I don't miss that damn hill, I can tell you that much.
Jeez. Oh, man. Was this hill a straight up hill? Was there stairs to it? Was it running in and out of the jungle and so forth?
This thing went straight up. You started right at sea level. As a matter of fact, you could see the ocean. It was right level with us, other side of the street, and you run up to your 2.5 miles. Every step is an incline. So coming down wasn't near as bad. That's kind of where you would regain yourself, and then we'd stop halfway, cross the street, and there was a staircase. And we had to sprint up that thing, and you had to be to the top in 18 seconds. If you weren't, it didn't count. Now, you only had to go up 3 times. But if you went up and you didn't get it in time, it didn't count. You had to go again. So, yeah, man, it was tough. Oh, my God. Of all the things I've had to do in this life, that Sunday morning, I was depressed all week long just knowing Sunday was coming. It was that hard.
When did you put in the training? When did you actually do your contact work?
We went every single day, Monday through Friday. Saturdays were off, and then we did the run on Sunday, and then the rest of the day was off. And I'm kind of 2-day off guy. I'm kind of go hard for 5 days, but I needed 2 days to recover. So I wasn't given that, but I had so much weight to lose. Also, going down to middleweight was very, very challenging for me. It was a lifestyle change. It was really hard. So you kind of needed those extra workouts just to burn the calories off.
Right.
But we would go, some level of contact 5 days a week. Either full speed wrestling or full speed sparring or full speed kickboxing, whatever it was. But every single evening, there was some kind of live contact.
Well, I always got you guys the week of the fight, and I only saw you cutting weight, and that was a hard week. What was your thought? What is your thought on fighters losing weight and cutting weight? When is this too much weight cut? I know there was a time, and I only heard this one I didn't know, that you lost 20 pounds in one day. When you fought Dan Miller, you actually lost 36 pounds in 22 days, taking a fight with 22 days out.
Yes. So the Dan Miller story, real fast. I had never been given a bonus in the UFC. I heard that was a thing, but I didn't know anything about it. I had to lose 36.2 pounds in 20 days from the day I got the call. The fight was 21 days from the day I got the call. It was those 36.2 pounds, and I got to include the 0.2 because those 0.2 were not wanting to come off. So that was physically the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And Dana read a story about that, and he gave me, after this was done, but he gave me $10,000 just for making weight. And I must tell you, $10,000, I'd have to fight 5 or 6 times a year back in the old day to have $10,000. It meant a lot to me. But I wish he would have told me ahead of time, if you make this, I'll give you this. It would have helped me through some restless nights. But that was the Dan Miller story. And then the 22 pounds, I had to lose 22 pounds in 17 hours one time. Fortunately, it was July in Las Vegas, so it was about 108 degrees out. And so it came off. The first few pounds came off pretty easy. The rest, again, that was another sleepless night.
Wow. And I know that's the hardest time. That was the hardest time. I didn't experience the training, but the weight cut, it was always the worst part of the training, the worst time for the guys. You mentioned about, the fact that you had cut that weight, that Dana dropped the $10,000 bonus on you. I've always known Dana to be pretty good with giving guys bonuses, and and I don't know if that was his thing with the bonus and so forth, but I hear a lot of guys complaining about the money that they make and the money that they're getting. What is your thought on that?
Well, so the sport has only gone up, to put it just from my perspective and my tenure, but I started in 2005 in terms of the UFC. That was my UFC debut, and I'd already had like 22 or 23 fights, Burt. I'd been at this a long time. I had a good record. I trained
22
every
years.
day. Yeah, I trained every day with multiple-time world champions. I knew where I stood. I knew where I belonged, but I was having a really hard time getting that opportunity. And to put that in perspective, though, I was minimum contract, and minimum contract in 2005 was $2,000 to show up and $2,000 to win.
Right.
Now, the minimum contract today is 12 and 12. And I don't know of another
Do you think
business.
that's fair?
Well, I just don't know of another business in that perspective. You could talk McDonald's, Fortune 500, ExxonMobil. I don't know of any business that brought the bottom up from $2,000 all the way to 12, which is 6 times higher in that short period of time. So I think they should get a lot of credit in that regard. The sport is very top-end heavy. Whoever the main event is largely feeding everybody else on the card. Over time, you grow up, you become main event, but now it's your job to pay everybody else back. So, or pay everybody forward, if you will. A lot of the top guys that are making very good seven figures plus would like to make even more. And I don't know that they're wrong to do that. It's just make sure you do understand the history of the sport, which is at some point you weren't that top guy, but you still got paid. So once you become the top guy, you are responsible for some others. That's true.
You know, it's I hear guys quite a bit either complaining or criticizing what they're making, and and comparing it to boxing. And it's tough to compare that. I worked in boxing, and I worked with Mike Tyson and Oscar De La Hoya and Roy Jones and all those guys when they were making all that money. But then again, at that time, you had 3 to 4 guys making 80 or 90% of the money. The rest of the guys were just getting paid. I know it was a long time before. I remember when guys were getting $50 a round. Guy walked home with $400, for a 4-round fight, and he was happy with it. But to make the comparison with boxing and MMA, but now that MMA has kind of escalated to a whole nother level, I hear the guys making comparison about the salaries, and I hear them complaining. But as a fighter, you feel that they're fair or unfair right now?
I really like it. I really like the way that it's structured in terms of, just take on an average night, you're going to have 5, what we are now calling in our industry, main card fights. But all 5 of those guys will be featured, emphasis on co-main and main event, but all 5 will be featured. All 5 stock goes up for next time. It's definitely an investment into your future, but all 5 are also paid very nicely. The undercard now has something to aspire to. So I very much like that. I agree with you on your boxing comparison, where if you look at the top guys in boxing, even say a Floyd Mayweather, he was only fighting twice a year and he was taking all of the money. So to try to aspire to that, I kind of like the way where we're doing it, where look, there's a different amount of money. And Burt, you have to understand this. I've never met anybody who's actually complained about what they're being paid. I've met people who are complaining about what they're being paid in conjunction with what they believe the ownership is being paid. That's where the argument comes in, that the split 100%. Is not fair. And that is very relevant, because if you do go look at boxing, and you could pull right into Top Rank today, you could go park in the parking lot, walk right into the door, whether Bob Arum's in there or not, you could go look around the office, but if you do that, you're going to find 8 people that work there. If you were to compare that to the UFC, where in Las Vegas alone, Dana has 556 employees, you need to understand why that money isn't just going home to the White family. He's got to spread that around the office. And it is a little bit different, where the split needs to be different because the personnel is different. Look, that's business, and those contracts, people are very excited when they sign them. Burt, I see these guys who are complaining, but if you go through some of their timelines on social media, the day they sign the contract, they're taking selfies. They're excited and thrilled. And then over time, they turn the gun back. I think that is underhanded. I do think if you make a deal's a deal.
Great point. I've always been of a mindset, you get what you ask for. You negotiate. If you take what you're paid in a contract, you agree to that. If you want more, you sit down and you think about it. You negotiate for what you think you should get, instead of, like you said, when they sign that contract, they're happy, and then all of a sudden, and I'm not a corporate guy. I got into this for fighters, for the sake of the fighters. It's always been in my heart for the sake of the fighters. I did a show once where this poor guy got $400 for a 6-round fight. And when the fight was over, they took out money for his medicals. They took out money for travel. This guy ended up with $110. And when he came to me and he showed me, I felt bad for the guy, and I went in my pocket and I gave him what little I think I had, maybe $150. I didn't give him the majority of it, but I gave him as much as I possibly could. But at that point, I said to myself, I will never let another promoter take advantage of a fighter. And that's why I got into this business and started trying to take care of you guys and guide you guys in the right direction, to make you feel that you were not just there to get your ass whooped and go home. That there was more, that there was more to it. Now, your wrestling background is stellar. Have you gotten into or taken any training in BJJ?
I did. Way too late in life, Bert. I started about 2014. I had fought for 5 world championships, 3 in the UFC, 2 in the WEC, and never done 1 day of jiu-jitsu practice. Now, I did MMA practice where there was plenty of submissions, but not a day of actual jiu-jitsu. Since then, 2014 till now, I made a commitment. I actually just received, if I could brag, I just received my black belt under Fabiano Scherner. Possibly the slowest rise to a black belt in history. I started martial arts in 1997, and I just received my black belt. But yeah, a lot of the mistakes that I made are positions that cost me in competition. Had I known what I know now, just about training and preparing, I would have spent more time specifically on jiu-jitsu. But to your question, yes, I do jiu-jitsu now. I didn't do jiu-jitsu soon enough.
Who in your mind is the best BJJ practitioner in the sport?
Well, in the sport of MMA, I think it's down to 2, and I think it would be very hard to argue around Damian Maia and Jacare Souza. I think it's between those two. Now, those two actually met up for a world championship in jiu-jitsu. Maia beat him 1-0, so I suppose Maia gets to win that argument, but I would have to think it's between those two. And by the way, Khabib Nurmagomedov doesn't fully do jiu-jitsu. He calls it sambo out of respect. He does not do sambo. But out of respect to his country, he calls it sambo. But as far as a ground athlete, I think Khabib's as good as you're going to find. In the absence of George St. Pierre, Khabib's as good as you're going to find.
Wow. Aside from yourself, who's the best MMA fighter you've ever seen?
Ooh, the best. Well, okay, so George St. Pierre is the best. And I hear these arguments made all the time. And I get asked to weigh in on it because I fought Anderson a couple of times, who's in that conversation. I fought John Jones, who's in that conversation. I fought Fedor, who's in that conversation. But I also had a fight that nobody saw. It was in the basement gym in L.A. in 2014, and it was against George St. Pierre. And I will tell you, with no happiness I will tell you, George St. Pierre whipped every one of those guys. Trust me on that. Really?
So you would say for all around, he's probably the best MMA fighter you've ever seen.
Best I've ever seen. Yeah, and you know what, Bert? That answer is going to change very quickly, and I'm not one of those guys that clings to the past. Like, you'll hear people arguing LeBron is better than Jordan or Jordan better than LeBron. You have to understand, if you take the standpoint that Jordan was better, okay, fine, but here's what you're also saying. You're saying the sport that you love has not evolved since 1992. And if you don't evolve, you become extinct. It's basic biology. So you're giving a tremendous insult to the entire sport of basketball by trying to compliment Jordan. I'm not one of these guys that comes to you with nostalgia. I'm just sharing with you that for right now at St. Pierre, this sport is still growing at a very rapid pace. I think what Kamaru Usman is doing is going to start to make a dent in the conversation. I think that Khabib has a number of great matches in front of him. He's completely undefeated. Not for nothing, I think Conor McGregor, though he may have trouble in some of the longer contests, look, as far as skill for skill goes, he's as good as I've seen.
Really?
Conor McGregor is fantastic. You know, he's so long, Bert. He's so fat. I went and looked at this guy. He's got an amateur boxing record. He never should have been given a license to fight professionally against Floyd. I mean, the commission steps in and tries to say, our first job is fighter safety. If that's true, you don't make that fight. But they did make the fight because it's not their first job. Commerce is their first job. But at any rate, 50-0, greatest ever against an amateur. An amateur who has never done this, and the amateur made it 30 minutes. I don't know of another guy, and I ain't going 30 minutes with the champion of my weight class in boxing. I'll tell you that much.
Wow. I originally, having been with these guys and seeing guys like yourself when they come into the league, you know, when they're rookies and their eyes are this big and they develop into legitimate martial artists and legitimate fighters, you know, I've seen that. At one point, I questioned a little bit about Conor's chin because I'd never seen it tested. But then when I saw Conor go a legitimate 6 rounds or beyond 6 rounds with Floyd Mayweather, I had a little change of a heart because, I mean, that was not an easy thing to do with a guy at that level.
Oh, I fully agree. I watched that fight name drop here, but I watched it shoulder to shoulder with Teddy Atlas. We were both out there with ESPN. We're working together on the coverage for the week. And Teddy was sweating bullets. I mean, he was openly telling anyone that would listen, I am very worried about this. The sport that I love and believe in is either real or it's not. And if this guy that's never done it before can beat our guy who's never lost it doing it before, I have hung my hat on the wrong rung. And Teddy was sweating. I mean, Conor came out in that first round and he whipped Floyd. And Conor won about 4 of those first 7 or 8 rounds. And I mean, people were getting very nervous, but moreover, to your point, yeah, he does have a chin. And you know what, Burt? He does everything wrong. I mean, he puts his chin up and his hands down. On rule 1, you learn to put your chin down and your hands up.
For real.
He still gets tested, but he's so quick. You know, he gets out of the way. He returns. He's a good fighter, man. You can like him or not like him, but as far as fighting goes, he knows what he's doing.
You know, that was one of the premier things of Smoking Joe. You know, chin down, straight out, but hands up. Even though he had that left hook and he lunged each time he went to throw it, but that chin down and hands up, that was the first rule or law. I'm going to throw a bunch of names at you very quickly. Mayhem Miller, Renato Soberall, Forrest Griffin, Jeremy Horn, Dan Miller, Yushin Akami, Vanderlei Silva, Anderson Silva, John Jones, Mike Bisping, Rampage, Fedor, Machida, Shogun Rua, and Damian Meyer. You fought all of those guys. Out of that list, what was your best fight?
My best performance that I was most proud of was against Yushin Okami. And to set the stage for that fight, Yushin was ranked number 2 in the world at that time. I was ranked number 9 in the world. We were the only 2 top 10 guys against each other on the card that entire night, aside from the main event. And we were on the undercard. And I was so upset. I was on the undercard because this guy from Japan, who's now maybe the best friend I've ever met in this sport, but I didn't know him at the time. This guy from Japan is refusing to do media. He's refusing to help out. And here we are, 2 top 10 guys thrown onto the undercard. I remember being so upset. I walked into the arena in front of nobody but my mom and uncle. I mean, it's a ghost town in there. The pay-per-view goes at 7. I mean, I was done, showered up, and having a nacho and a Coca-Cola by 5:30, right? I mean, that's how early we fought on this card. And Burt, I won every round of that fight. And I knew this guy was a rough guy. I mean, I knew this was going to be a really hard match. I won every round of that fight. I was very proud of that. I don't mean to brag. I just had a really good performance. It was one of those performances that I don't know that I've ever duplicated. And when it was done, I remember looking at my corner going, I'm really happy to win, but that's the best I've ever competed in my life. Just everything went well, and I don't know why. And that was the one, performance-wise, though, that was the best version of me that I've ever been able to put forward.
What was your worst fight?
My worst fight, I fought with Rashad Evans, and it was just one of those things where I just simply didn't bring my skills. I left my skills in the back, and there's various things that go into that, most of them that would be compliments to Rashad. I had an intimidation factor by Rashad. He was a college wrestler. I knew who he was. He was a bigger guy. I was moving into a weight class. And so there was a few moving parts that I think mentally maybe held me up in hindsight that I look at, but it also affected me physically, and I just felt like I didn't perform. I wouldn't argue for you that the outcome would be different or I could beat Rashad, though maybe I could, but that's not my argument. My argument is just I could have competed better. And one thing in this sport that you really want to do, any sport, but particularly a one-on-one, you just want to compete. It's about the performance, not the outcome. So instead of focusing on, am I going to win or am I going to lose and getting worried about that, if you can calm down a little bit and just think about what does it take for me to perform at my best, you can be very happy with yourself at the end of the night, regardless of if you got the gold or the silver medal. But when you don't perform, those are the competitions that stick with you. Those are the ones that keep you up at night for a while.
How about a fight you didn't want or a fight you didn't get?
John Anik and I were working together at Fox, and he made a comment to me one time. And he said, Chael, your career will never be complete until you fight Vanderlei Silva and Vitor Belfort. And I don't know why he said it. It was an off comment, just no longer than what I just laid out for you. But as soon as he said it, I believed it and I accepted it as true. So I got the fight with Vanderlei. I never got the fight with Vitor. And for some reason, Anik has convinced me my career is not complete. So I guess Vitor would be my answer. Hey, Burt, can I ask you one thing, just because we were talking about boxing a second ago? I maintain that the greatest talent we've ever seen in boxing, but a lot of this is because of nostalgia. I loved the Four Horsemen. I thought that was some of the best marketing in boxing history. I'm talking about the real Four Horsemen: Hagler, Hearns, Duran, Leonard. But I will maintain for you that Sugar Ray Leonard is the best. Sugar Ray Leonard would not maintain that. He says it was Sugar Ray Robinson. Am I close, though? I mean, will you at least admit Sugar Ray Leonard was something special?
Sugar Ray Leonard was something special, and I would put Sugar Ray Leonard in the top 4 of all times. He was something special.
Who's one?
Muhammad Ali. And I only, because of the fact that I worked with Smoking Joe Frazier, and Joe Frazier was my guy, but, you know, I saw Muhammad Ali through the era of George Foreman, Larry Holmes, Ken Norton, Joe Frazier. I saw Muhammad Ali through that era take all of those punches, take those shots. You know, he was off for 3 years and came back and still maintained those technical skills at a high level. You know, he had a ridiculous gas tank. I don't know how a guy maintained the stamina that he did when he kept getting hit here, because that's where he let you hit him. He would allow you to hit him. Every time you started hitting him, he would pull you in a little bit. He would take a rest with you throwing, and then he'd back you up and he would pepper you a little bit. He would pepper you. Secondly, I would throw Joe Frazier in there. Of course, not only was that my man, but Joe Frazier's record spoke for himself. I'm going to go a little to the left with Roberto Duran. I thought Roberto Duran was something special. And I did a few of his fights, and, you know, I was disappointed when I had the opportunity to do the last fight when he fought against Camacho, but I was always a Roberto Duran fan. But, you know, for technical skills and ring generalship and being able to control a fight and knowing when to control a fight, I just think when he fought Ray, it was something different to him. The speed that Ray had and, you know, the taunting that Ray had. Roberto Duran came from a day of gladiators when supposedly men were men and boys were boys. Sugar Ray Leonard came along and he put a little more flash into that. And I think that just totally frustrated him, you know, to a point that we had that infamous no mas. But those are my guys.
You know, you mentioned somebody, and I was doing a signing at the Mandalay Bay. There's like a sports memorabilia store, and a guy will bring people in. The guy that owns it, a guy named Keith, actually is Roy Jones Jr.'s manager, so he's a fight guy. And I'm in there doing my little signing. I got to be there for an hour, and I'm standing next to a liar. This guy I'd never met, this older gentleman. And Burt, he won't quit lying to me for an hour. He beat Muhammad Ali. He was the greatest boxer. This guy he won't stop lying, these blatant lies. The guy's name was Ken Norton, who I was not familiar with. I had to go home and look this guy. I couldn't believe it. Oh my God, I'm glad I didn't tell him he was a liar. That probably would have been a great day.
Wow.
I didn't know who Ken Norton was. The name went under the radar. Another one is Jack Johnson that people don't give enough credit to.
Absolutely.
Jack Johnson was fighting.
Where was
Johnson?
this that you met Ken Norton?
We were in the Mandalay Bay, and there's a sports memorabilia store. Pete Rose would go to a lot.
Yes, I know that.
Yep. So I did a signing with this guy that just kept lying to me. Said he beat Muhammad Ali. Said his name was Ken Norton. He beat Muhammad Ali. Turned out he wasn't lying.
Nope.
But you remember,
and I know him well. Former Marine. He was another one. You know, but
you remember Jack Johnson, though, of course.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
See, a lot of that was a timeline thing, too. Jack Johnson, you know, the fact that he was a black heavyweight champion is very relevant to the story because this was the day of the Klan. And
Correct.
They would come out and say, hey, if you beat this white man, we're going to kill your black brothers. And Jack Johnson told him, then you get ready to kill a brother because I'm knocking that white man out. And then he would.
He didn't care at all. As a matter of fact, I think he moved to Europe in defiance. You know, I think he was being defiant when he moved to Europe.
Well, remember, they were going to arrest him. In fact, I believe they did arrest him because he was dating white women. And there was like a law against that. And he drove one, it might have been his wife, but he drove her across the state line into another state. They try a federal crime now. I mean, very, very unfair. And he was still knocking people out, Burt. He didn't give a damn, Jack Johnson.
And you know what? That was when he threw. It wasn't actually called a jab because it came from here.
Sure.
You know? Yeah, he did.
The Irish style, right?
So when Chael, now you're with Bellator. You had your last fight 2019. Are you done or are you still fighting?
I am completely done. I'm even done competing, and I have to tell you, you'll never quit dreaming about those days. Like, the match that keeps me up the most in my life, Burt, is none of the ones we discussed. It was a match that nobody saw. It was in college. It was in 1998 in what's called the blood round, which means if you win, you're an All-American. If you lose, your season is done. And I was ahead by 1 point. I went for a technique that I went right to my back. I got pinned by Zach Thompson of Iowa State. There has never been a match that has bothered me more in my life than that match. And the only reason I bring that up to you is I am all done competing, but it's Olympic year. The Olympics are going to be next year. Every 4 years, I get Olympic fever. I have dreams of coming back and trying to make an Olympic team in wrestling. I'm not going to do it, but if I were to do something, I would come back to that before I came back to MMA.
Wow. Well, I mean, right now you're hosting ESPN. You're an MMA analyst for them. You got Bad Guy Inc. As a matter of fact, what is Bad Guy Inc.? Explain that to us a little bit.
You know what? Bad Guy Inc. is no more than the name on this sign behind me. I mean, I started a company called Bad Guy Inc. It ties it. We started doing T-shirts, but then we got into some branding. I started a YouTube page, fortunately, but it was able to get big enough that it's turned into a full media company. But that's all it. Really, it's just a cool sign that sits behind me.
So what do you do on your time off? What are some of your hobbies?
Oh, man. Okay, Burt, if there's one thing in life I do not want, it is a day off. Like, if I check my calendar every night when I go to bed to see, what time the first thing is the next day. If that calendar is ever empty, which is rare, but if it is, oh my God, that would be a depression for me. I hate days off as much as I hate sleep. But if I had some free time, I really like a movie. I like a movie at the theater, though, with a Coke big enough to swim in and a popcorn that I could never finish. And so the movies are all shut down right now. So that's been a tough one for me. But I don't have a lot of hobbies. I wish I did. I wish like I knew how to ski. I don't even know the first step. I don't know where I even rent the equipment, or do you have to have a ticket or a pass? I don't know how that works. I wish I knew how to fish. I wish I knew how to play tennis. I just never learned those things. So I have a lot of hobbies. I mean, I have a lot of interests, but I don't have a whole lot of hobbies. I'm interested in politics, by example. Very boring for most people, but I like those debates. I like when two guys are verbally arguing and it comes down to who's quicker than who. It comes down to body language. I study a lot of those things that other people would find dull.
Speaking of debates, you're very passionate about what you say, but not always who you say it to. What and where would you feel would be the most powerful place for your voice?
Oh, I have a fantasy of ending up in the White House, but I don't know that I will pursue that. I mean, I do have several interests, and Washington, D.C. is a long ways from Westland, Oregon. But, I suppose like anybody that would run for office, I would fall into a category of you have a big ego. You think you're smarter than other people. Sometimes you're right, sometimes you aren't. But I think I would fall into that category, whether that's good or bad. And I would like to have a little bit more influence. I would like to have some debates with some of these, alleged smart people and see who comes out on top, Burt. But I have a feeling it'd be one more for the bad guy.
That's always the greatest line.
Do you think when I run that the constituents will appreciate the Robin Hood story as much as you did? I mean, do you think... Like, nobody's really recognized me. Like, I would think there'd be a statue put up in my hometown for some of these heroic behaviors. But everybody just kind of, blows over it.
Kind of lets that Robin Hood story go away.
Let it go.
Well, during your career, there have been some discrepancies, some things of miscommunications. What would you do differently in your career and what things have happened in your career that people have not understood.
Okay, so I think that you're talking about me being suspended for a plethora of performance-enhancing drugs that I was synthetically inserting into my ass. Now, I have to tell you this, Burt. If I could go back, if I could have the information that would have been helpful, if I could have had some of the testing and some of the education that would have been helpful, you want to know what I would have done differently? I wouldn't have got caught.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
Oh, I was cheating, Burt. You want to know why I was cheating? Because old Chael doesn't like coming in second. That's the truth, Burt.
Well, you know what? Only the worst guys I know come in second, man. You know, but you know, you've had such a great career, and like I said, it's been 22 years that you've done this, and 2020, I think it was 2016. You started in Bellator. 2019 was the last. You've made a lot of good choices, and some not so many good choices. But you know what? You've always made the right choices, because you're still sitting there. You're looking at me. You're talking, and you know, anybody that knows you can appreciate you and can appreciate your career. And I can tell you, man, I appreciate you. I appreciate your career, and it's an honor for me to sit and talk to you as a legend and somebody that's made an impact and will still continue to make an impact in this sport.
Burt, that was beautiful. That was very sweet of you. I don't know that I deserved that, but thank you for that. And I got to tell you, that's mutual. And by the way, I feel like you're about to kick me off the show. Before you do, does the audience know about the time you were mad at me? Do you remember the time in WEC when we had to weigh in the morning of weigh-ins with you between 9 and 11 a.m. So I went down to the scale, but apparently I was in the wrong room, but I found the scale. So I thought I was in the right room, but I had no way to communicate with you. And this is before I had my first cell phone. So all I had, do you remember this? I found a towel and I found a marker. So I wanted to leave you a note to let you know I was here. I was here, but I must be in the wrong place. So I literally wrote you a note on a towel and just hung it over the scale. Then I went back to my room.
I do remember that. I remember that.
You forgave me. You were like, hey, nobody stiffs me on a weigh-in.
No.
But I got your, I got your note. I go, okay.
But
I got out of bed. I came there.
You know, leaving me that note, and I remember asking Lester. I don't know if you remember Lester. Because Lester knew that you left that note. And I asked Lester, who left that note? And he said to me, who else?
Hey, you have no idea how hard it is. It is so hard to write a message on a brand new towel with all the, I was over and over and over. Each letter I was having to really scribble this thing. And then I get to the bottom, I've got to like sign my name in bold letters over and over and over as the ink from the pen was going dry from the fabric of the cotton towel. Anyway, I'm glad you forgave me for that, because you were pretty pissed at the time.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I was. Well, you know what? I think I was more pissed that you had the time to write all that on a towel than anything else. But you know, I was always very, very proud of the way, you know, that you guys responded, because I know sometimes I was a bit of a jackass, but you know what? Best being a jackass than a horse's ass.
Absolutely.
You know, right now my record since boxing, or in boxing and MMA, right now is 356-0. If you average out 9 fights in a course of my career, I have walked 6,408 guys to the cage.
Awesome.
And I didn't do that by not paying attention and not being a jackass every now and then.
Sometimes, right? Sometimes I would never think you were a jackass, but I hear what you're saying, and you did a very good job of keeping control, of keeping organized. You were possibly the most organized guy there. Nobody else was worrying about our weigh-ins. Nobody knew whether you made it from the airport or not. Nobody knew if you were in the lobby at 6 a.m. to get yourself back home after a trip, except you, and I appreciate that, Burt.
Well, I appreciate you, and I appreciate this, Chael. You know what? And this was only a lead up to us at some point getting to do part 2 of this, because I'm going to tell you something, man. I've had a great time, and I've enjoyed every bit of it, and I want you to tell me right now that we're coming back for part 2.
Guaranteed. Man of my word, I'll be in part 2 anytime you want.
Hey, man, thanks for joining me on Legends of Legends. And all I got to do is say, keep rolling, baby.
See you, Burt.